All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to the channel. It is Friday, October 3rd, year of our Lord 2025. And we're going to, continue or maybe finish this video from Center for Biblical Unity about the new Christendom, black culture, all that drama and all that kind of thing. So let's begin. All right. Before we get started, let me just eat a little bit of crow here. The Mets, epic fail. Epic fail. And so, you guys remember, you guys are very good, and you're going to hold my feet to the fire, which, of course, is your right. In the beginning of the year, I said, you know what? I'm not too worried about the pitching, right? I'm not too worried about the pitching. And let me just say this. Let me start at the outset. That we did have quite a few injuries. It's not an excuse, but we did have quite a few injuries. But if you remember what I said at the beginning, this is why it's not an excuse. I said, pitchers get injured, they get injured, and that's why you collect a lot of these jags, because eventually someone's going to get hurt, you plug in another guy, everything's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. But everything was not fine. Now, I don't think that the Mets didn't make the playoffs because of the pitching only. I think there's also a huge problem with the lineup, and you look at the lineup and it seems like it'd be good, and if you look at the numbers of the people in the lineup, they look decent. I mean, we should be in the playoffs is what it looks like. But there's a problem, and I identified this problem midway through the season, and I talked about it. I said the Mets were like the Mighty Ducks, but the problem is that the Mighty Ducks in real life don't actually win. It's only in the movies that this ragtag group of buffoons can somehow be good. The Hawks always win. That's the truth. In real life, the Hawks always win because they're professionals. They work really hard. They're also talented, but they actually work at it. They treat it like a job. And the Mets, unfortunately, are like a clown show. They've got a bunch of goofballs. And I know they're professionals, too. I get it. But they don't have any dudes. You know what I mean? They need some dudes. And that's the problem. I mean, we had terrible numbers with runners in scoring position. And that's the time when the dudes have to hit. And unfortunately, our dudes just didn't hit enough when it really counted. When you've got runners in scoring position. Ducks on the pond, as Keith Hernandez likes to call it. We just failed, man. An absolute epic collapse. And I got to say, as a Mets fan, I've been witness to many of these collapses in my time. So this is nothing unusual for me, but this is probably the worst one. And that is saying a lot. And maybe it's just recent, bias because this is what's happening right now. But I don't think so. I think this really is the most epic of all the epic collapses that I've witnessed. This is the most epic. And I think one of the reasons why is because it happened in slow motion. I mean, everyone knew a couple months ago that this was going to happen. And it came down to the last game of the season, which is so funny because there's 162 games, and it comes down to the final game, and you get shut out. That's not a pitching problem. That's a hitting problem. You don't have any dudes, right? And even Soto, who I think is an excellent player. Obviously, he's an excellent player. He's the Adam Banks, like I said, of the Mighty Ducks. He shows up. He's the best player on the team, but he's not really trying that hard. I mean, he's like, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep playing well. I'm going to collect my stats, and you guys do whatever it is you're going to do, which, unfortunately, that's our situation. We don't have a leader. We don't have any dudes. We've got a bunch of goofballs. Good players. Alonso, fantastic player. I want him back. But he's not the dude. He's not the leader, Lindor is most certainly not the leader. Nimmo, I love Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo, brother in the Lord. He's just not the dude, You just need a dude. I think if I was the Mets, I'd make a serious run at Kyle Schwarber because he seems like a dude, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But, I'm going for the Yankees now. That's just how it is. I like the Yankees. I was going for the Reds, too, but they just were not equipped to beat the Dodgers, obviously. And a lot of people say, the Mets would have done better. No, they wouldn't have. They just wouldn't have. The Mets would have still lost, probably in 2 games. Maybe they would have snuck one away from the Dodgers, but I don't think so. Because in real life, the Hawks always win, and the Dodgers are most certainly the Hawks. That's how it is. That's just how it is. You got to accept it. Now, what would have happened if the Mets made the wild card is you would have had a more entertaining series. And the reason why is because they would have collapsed in a much more entertaining fashion. They would have lost in a very entertaining, maybe even historical fashion. Like, it would have been something like this, where it's like you're winning in the ninth inning by 4 or 5 runs, and the Dodgers come storming back in the bottom of the ninth, setting a record for, having won the game with being down so many runs in the ninth. It would have been very entertaining, I think. So, that's just how it is. That's how it is. And I personally, I blame Big Eva. It's as simple as that. I blame Big Eva, and I'll tell you why. It's just not just me blaming Big Eva for no reason. No, I've got a good reason. Because the Mets, since they had that gay celebration of homosexuality and sodomy and tolerance and all that stuff, which Big Eva, of course, supports, they completely collapsed. They were the worst team in the league, I'm pretty sure, if not maybe the second worst, including the Rockies. Since that day, they just collapsed since that day. It was a perfect line of demarcation. They were the best team in the league before that day. This is no joke. You can look it up. The best team in the league, and that was a significant part of the season, maybe like a quarter or a third of the season. They were the best team in the league. And then they did the Big Eva's gay celebration, and then they became the worst team in the league instantly. And they deserve every bit of it. It's as simple as that. They deserve every bit of it. And I personally blame the Mets' collapse on Big Eva. I think you can agree with me. I made an airtight, solid case. Nobody can ever question that. But in any case, let's get started. We'll pick it back up right where we left off, and we will do as much as we can. Here we go.
Even within that context, the vast majority of that crime is still committed by a small minority in that community. The vast majority of the people in that community don't hold to that culture or don't believe in those values.
Right.
For example, when BLM was arguing to defund the police, all the statistics showed that the people who actually live in these high crime communities wanted more policing.
Right, but that's true. I'll give them that. I haven't seen the statistics, but I'm just gonna assume it's true, and I believe it. I believe it's probably true, right? But if you look at the voting patterns, though, they voted for politicians that agreed with the lack of police. And so this is the thing, like, you could say whatever you want, right? You could say whatever you want. Like, and this is something that I was thinking through recently. Michael Foster posted, something like, hey, nobody cares if you were the first to be right about something. What we care about is whether you're taking action right now to solve or to address the thing that you were first right about, right? And that's so true. Like, your actions, this is an old proverb, an old wisdom. Your actions speak louder than your words, right? You can say literally anything. You could say, oh yeah, the Federal Reserve, they're debasing the currency. But if you keep all of your money in dollars, your actions tell me that you actually don't believe what you're telling me. And if you do, then maybe you're just stupid, right? Because if you believe that the Federal Reserve, obviously we all have to use dollars, right? We all have to use dollars to pay taxes and to buy items. And so it's, of course, you keep certain money liquid in dollars because you wouldn't be able to get by in normal life without it. Obviously, right? Obviously. But if you're not doing anything about it, if all of your investments are in dollars and you're buying bonds and stuff like this, like, do you really even believe what you're saying? And if you do, then maybe you're just not bright enough to understand what you're talking about. Because if you think the Federal Reserve is debasing the currency and all of your money is in dollars, which is being debased according to your words, then you're either stupid or you don't actually believe what you're telling me, right? You should do certain things with your money if you believe that the Federal Reserve is debasing the currency, which it definitely is, and it's going to continue into the future most likely. So you've got to prepare yourself for that, right? And a good example would be I borrowed money to buy my house, right? And I borrowed money back when interest rates were below 3. Now, I'd like to say that was intentional, but it was just luck of the draw. I borrowed money at less than 3%. That's a blessing from God, right? Blessing from God. Now, I could pay off my mortgage early, But I believe, and I'll tell you, that the Federal Reserve is debasing the currency at record rates, and it's going to continue into the future. That's what I believe, right? And if you look at my actions, I'm not paying off my mortgage, even though I could early, because I believe that the money that I pay my mortgage back at 2% interest or whatever it is, 2.5%, 2.6, something like that, that the money that I pay back is worth less than the 2.6% that I paid to borrow it. And so I'm actually making out like a bandit by not paying out my mortgage early. Now, of course, there is some risk associated with keeping a mortgage. I get that. I understand that. But mathematically, I'm making out like a bandit. The bank wants me to pay it back early because they're losing money on that loan every single day. You know what I mean? And so my actions, I'm telling you that the Federal Reserve is debasing the currency, and I think it's going to continue into the future most definitely. My actions are actually following that belief. And so if you look at my actions, it matches up with the belief. I'm not paying back my mortgage early, even though I could. And the reason why, and the main reason, is because I am making more money on the money I have currently than I would by paying back the mortgage early, and saving on interest is essentially what it boils down to. The mortgage actually functions like an asset for me, which is weird to say, but it's really true. And so actions speak louder than words. And so black people could say all day, oh, I believe we should have more police, right? But if you're voting for the party that's defunding the police and trying to hobble them and make their job harder and demonizing them and all of this kind of stuff, and say, oh, by the way, we need to have, social worker cops that say, hey, please don't kill that person, like that kind of thing. All you got to do is look into the future, is look at England, what they do with their police. That's what Democrats want to do with our police. So you can tell me all day long, yeah, we need more police, we gotta be harder on crime. But your actions don't actually prove that you actually think that. If anything, maybe you do think that, but you're too stupid to understand what your actions are actually doing. Also, you can participate in this kind of bad, negative culture in numerous ways, right? Like, just because you're not out there gangbanging and, you're not robbing people and killing people and stuff like that, you can actually support it based on what you glorify, right? Which happens all the time. Again, in the black community, right? Who was glorified? That was a criminal. Well, look at the list of all the inappropriate shootings of black people by white cops. Like, pretty much all of them were criminals. Long rap sheets, all this stuff, and yet you get GoFundMes that raise tons of money glorifying these people as if they're some kind of hero. Your actions speak louder than your words. So you could say whatever you want. I don't support that kind of culture. I don't support that kind of culture. But then your actions show me that, in fact, you do. Maybe you don't know that you do, but you do. That's the point, right? There's more than one way to support this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not saying that Kevin Briggins votes for Democrats or actually supports this in any functional way. I mean, just taking a good look at his background here, I highly doubt that he does. But the problem is that lots of other black people do. Even the ones you probably think don't, they actually do.
Understand the issues that are going on and the problem. They wanted more policing. We have to make sure we're not.
I wanted more policing, but my vote guarantees I won't get it. I mean, that's the thing.
Or mischaracterizing an entire group of people by this one element of the culture. But even people who come out of, or people who live in those inner cities, they're talking about single moms who talk.
And it's like crazy because we all knew this not that long ago that this was the case. I mean, I've seen articles being shared by Virgil Walker not that long ago, and other people that understand that. Yeah, sure. I mean, Virgil's a black guy. I mean, I don't listen to hip hop. I don't glorify gangbangers, George Floyd, this, that, and the other. That's not me. But when you think of black people as a group in general, those are the things you think about. Those are the things you think about. So what is our culture known for is basically what it is, right? And I don't think Kevin even would disagree with this, that is basically what they're known for, that kind of stuff. And it's not good and it's not fair to the many black people that don't support that kind of stuff, because there are. Let's face it, there are. But that's a problem that needs to be addressed and fixed. And to pretend like it's actually not a problem, that's not black culture. That's just pretense. You're pretending that that's not what black culture is known for. I don't know why you're doing that, because, chances are, like, in other contexts, other conversations, I bet you Kevin would agree with that. Would agree with one of Virgil Walker's articles or something that Doug has written about the black community and things like that. Like, there's a lot of pretense going on right now, and I think it's because, New Christendom saying it is really why the pretense is there, right? Because we all kind of agreed with this not that long ago.
About how they just want their kids to be able to go out and play without having to worry, or go down the street to the park and not have to worry about getting shot. The people in
This is true, and this was true back during Chris Rock's thing, right? This was true back then as well. He talked about how every day the amount of room they can play gets smaller and smaller before eventually you're just hopping in a circle because of black culture. That's what the whole comedy sketch was about. We all understood this. We all understand it's not every black person down to the man, woman, and child. Like, we all get it. But let's not pretend like we don't understand what, like, oh, this white guy with the mustache is saying it. I mean, what is he talking about? Like, I've never heard of that.
These communities don't even want that type of violence. They want the police to come in and do something. We have to make sure that we're not painting everyone within this particular culture and framework just based on skin color. From a Christian standpoint, it would be as if Westboro Baptist Church, right, and all of their antics and hate and all the things they do was put up as the picture of Christianity. We were all like, that's not Christianity. I understand.
Right, but that's kind of the point, though, right? Because it is obvious to any observer that Westboro Baptist Church, picketing, funerals and stuff like that, with their message, is not representative of Christian culture as a whole, right? It's not what Christians are known for. That's changing. I mean, some people think that is what we're known for, right? But like, we all understand that. We have no reason to fight it. Yeah, I mean, like, they're crazy. We all get it, right? That's not how Christians normally act, right? That's not very common, and we're not even talking about norms here. It's like, it's just not common. The reason why it's exceptional is because it's exceptional. Nobody supports it. Nobody votes like they support it. Nobody donates money like they support it, right? Like, very few people do. But that's not the case when it comes to what Brian's describing as black culture. Black culture, I mean, we've got tons and tons of famous artists that we all listen to and support and think it's black excellence and stuff. We even think it so much that we'll put them in our Christian books as examples to follow because they understand diversity and all this kind of stuff. It's so common that stuff is not uncommon to see. It's not uncommon to see that kind of stuff, glorifying that stuff, praising it if there's some kind of lyrical genius. Drop 16 bars, Jay-Z, that's common. That's common. But you don't see that when it comes to Westboro Baptist Church. There's no Westboro Baptist Church example like in pop culture that we're all celebrating, right? Like, we're all like, oh, did you hear that new musician, bluegrass, and he's beautiful, white excellence, and it's the same kind of culture and message of Westboro Baptist Church. There's no comparison. So it's not a matter of, you're just taking the worst elements and saying it's an example for the entire group. No, it's because in one case, it's obviously fringe, and it's treated as fringe. In the other case, maybe it's fringe also, comparatively speaking, it isn't, but it's celebrated as if this is black excellence. These are exemplars. These are things to glorify. That's why. I mean, it's not rocket science.
Saying that these guys are trying to make sense of what they're seeing. One of the failures of the black community, which we have talked about, is the refusal to speak up about these issues that do exist. That's why.
I mean, this is a smart guy. But for some reason, he's not seeing the connection. Yes, that is one of the problems. The refusal to do anything about it. The refusal to change your voting patterns. The refusal to actually say, you know, maybe George Floyd, like, you know, sad that he died, but like, you know, maybe he bears some of the responsibility for his death. Maybe. That's all part of it. That's all part of the reason why Brian says what he says. It's because it appears that there's very few examples. In fact, the examples calling it out and doing anything about it are fringe in the black community. Now, they're good. I'm not against them. I'm glad that fringe exists, but they are fringe. In fact, ask Virgil Walker how many times he gets called an Uncle Tom for saying obviously true, correct things about the problems in the black community. Even I've faced that kind of criticism before, and I'm not even black. I've been told that I hate my own people when I say anything about minorities. You know, I've been told that, you know, the fact that I'm a minority, but I'm willing to fight against the woke church stuff and stuff like that. That's I'm a self-hating Puerto Rican. That's the kind of, it's so fringe that we get attacked by our own, you know, our own ethnicities for saying obviously true things. Like, you know what? It's not good that so many black kids have to grow up without a father. Not good. And we got to take some ownership of that and fix that. That's not anything anyone's doing to us. We've got to do it for ourselves. This is the whole point. Like, you get it. You get it, but Brian said it, so I got to fight against it, I guess. It's like, it's very strange.
Why we called our podcast Off Code, because there are certain things we're not allowed to talk about publicly in the black community because there's this sense of you don't put family business in the street.
But see, you get it. You are the fringe in the black community, and I'm glad you're there, but why are you pretending like what Brian said about black culture isn't, like, what is he talking about? Like, this is, how could he say such a thing? Like, you get it. You actually get it. It's very strange. It's very strange. Very strange indeed.
Or you don't talk about family business in mixed company. Basically what that means is you don't make black people look bad in front of white people.
I mean, he's probably been called an Uncle Tom numerous times in his life. I understand how this works. Right? I understand how this works. Even Dave Chappelle, you know, in his Keeping It Real Goes Wrong, he talks about it. Like, you know, when the businessman, a black businessman, great story, he freaks out and Wu-Tang, you know, all that. He's part of it is like deep down, he always felt like an Uncle Tom, you know, because there's so much pressure to just let it happen. Just let this happen, you know, gangbangers and all this stuff. Just let it happen. Don't say anything about it. Not in front of the whites, like, you know, like, maybe you could say it, but like privately, you know. This is very interesting. This video is very interesting to me because he's a smart guy. He gets what's being said, but something has compelled him to fight against it. I wonder what that is. I wonder what that is. I could venture a few guesses. Oh, man.
Essentially what that means. And so the real issues of the black community in which black people are fully aware of, we will not talk about these issues openly and honestly for the fear of what do other people outside think of us? What will the racist white supremacists think of us? If we start talking about the issues of crime, we're placating to racist tropes and things like that. It's a psychological hurdle and mental block that exists in the minds of a lot of black people. The problem is that when we don't talk about these things openly and honestly, we leave outsiders to make their own conclusions on these things. And when people are seeing the news, they're seeing the violence, they're getting one picture of the image of the black community, they're going to draw their own conclusions, even if those conclusions are wrong and false, which in this video they are.
How? He's talking about all the problems that you're talking about. The only way it's wrong is if you think, which beyond all reason, that somehow he actually does believe this applies to all black people, even though he specifically said it doesn't. This is the entirety of the culture. even though he obviously doesn't believe that. But it is very common, and it is accepted, and you can see it all over the place. It's apparent. It's apparent. So he's saying he drew the wrong conclusions. Which of those conclusions? Because you seem to agree with all of them.
One who been in Reformed churches, who's been in predominantly white churches, I would say the last 15 years. This idea that someone from this cultural context is going to walk into your church for church membership and practice this type of culture, it shows he doesn't understand black culture, because no one from that cultural context is walking into your church for church membership.
It's not true. It is just simply not true. We covered that in the last episode. It is simply not true. The entire woke movement within Reformed circles is this culture invading a church. Now, if all he's saying is that, you know, murderers and drug dealers are not likely to come to your Reformed church, that is obviously true. But that's not the entirety of the negative black culture that he's talking about. It just isn't. It is what he identified, you know, as some of the bigger problems, but it's not the entirety of it. It's the people that put the black, you know, square or circle on their profile. How many Reformed, you know, churches dealt with that? It's the people that glorified George Floyd as some kind of martyr and stuff like that, and said Derek Chauvin was this racist. Like, that's all part of this negative black culture that we're talking about here. How many Reformed churches, even from the pulpit, talked about that? He's not correct. This is not correct. I mean, if all he's saying is that murderers and things like that are not likely to go to church, that's true no matter what race you are, of course.
It is a subculture within black culture. But the images that are portrayed largely as black culture, most black people do not agree with, because it is a particular type of ghetto culture that is leading to that crime. All of these areas where black people live, where the vast majority of black people live, this stuff doesn't exist. The vast majority of black people do not live on the south side of Chicago, Baltimore, Memphis, these high crime inner city violent areas. That's not where most of us live.
Right, but there's still elements of that negative culture that go everywhere. They go everywhere. It's just true. It's just true. So maybe they're not, you know, doing drive-bys in a suburb in so-and-so, although I'm not sure that that's the case. But that's not all that's negative about black culture. It just isn't. Anyway, I've got a phone call coming in. She's called twice, and I got to pick it up for work. We will try to finish off the last minute in just, maybe tomorrow. We'll see what happens. But anyway, I hope this video was helpful. God bless.